like bass players too.
What's up? I'm so excited about this. We are here at Guitcon 2018. I've been excited to do this video for a minute. I'm here with Adam Neely. Woo! You're going to see his channel down in the video description below. Check it out. I'm also here with Jayme Lewis from thebassist.net. So they've both got mad bass chops and mad bass skills. And as you guys know, if you watch my channel, I am not a bass player. I mean, I'm a hack bass player. I consider myself a frustrated bass player.
We're all bass players to an extent.
We're all frustrated bass
players.
We're all
frustrated.
Well, these guys really know what they're doing. And I can remember all the way back to this is going back a long, long time, but I'd already got out of MI and everything, graduated, and I got in a band, great bass player in that band. Okay, I'll name her. Her name's Jen Condos. She's a terrific bass player. And we were jamming one day in a rehearsal studio, just kind of like, we were in a group. So it was like, we were a band. I played guitar, she played bass, that kind of thing. But I think she got back on the drums and said, why don't you play bass for a minute? We'll just jam. So I got the bass and started playing, and she's playing the drums. She's like, you're a terrible bass player. And that was really the moment where I wait a minute. It's not just 4 strings tuned an octave lower, it's totally different.
A little bit more to it, yeah.
Right? Yeah, and just like its role within the band is just we fit a very different role in just very different sonic space, and that translates into how you play the instrument too. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
even though technically you can play all the same licks that you would on guitar, just a little bit bigger, it's just your general musical approach just has to get tweaked a little bit to locking in with the drummer a little bit more, or how you sit underneath the guitars. There's all these little details that aren't immediately obvious when you just pick it up and play it.
Right.
So maybe the first thing is it's a mental shift, thinking about things differently than a guitar player would, right?
Yeah,
taking
for sure.
that into account is really important. So I'm excited to get some tips, some tricks, and actually maybe learn some right hand skills here. And because I'm the one finger when I use my fingers. When I love the tone, but I feel so limited, and many times in the almost in the back of my mind when I'm trying to play, or even with one finger, I'm like, just pick up the pick. You don't know what you're doing. It's like this psychological almost lack of confidence.
Sure, yeah.
Well, yeah, and James Jamerson, he played with just one finger.
The hook,
yeah, right.
And he could do some pretty crazy things, but it is very, it's more freeing to be able to play with 2 fingers. So maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Cool. Okay.
Actually, Jayme, let me ask you before we get into this.
Yeah.
Where do you fall on the strict alternating versus raking debate?
Okay, so what he's talking about, you want to demonstrate really quick?
Yeah.
What he's talking about?
For example, so one of the things when we talk about 2-finger technique for bass players, we generally alternate index, middle, index, middle, index, middle.
Okay.
So there's a couple ways of thinking about it. Basically, if you're going this way across the strings, when you're coming from say the G string right here down to the D string, you could play it 2 different ways. If I played, for example, a box shape, like that, 5-3, 5-3. I could alternate either index, middle, which is what we would call strict alternation, where we basically just, whatever note we're playing, we always go back and forth, no matter what. Okay. Index finger, middle finger, index finger, middle finger.
I go 1, 2, 3. I would give them numbers.
Okay,
yeah,
so
it's
1, 2.
The same as that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 1, 2, 1, 2. Or there's another idea, which is raking, which is basically instead of going 1, 2, you notice once I pluck right here with my second finger, my middle finger, it's already on the D string. So then that gives me the opportunity to then play whatever note I'm on the D string with.
2,
1. So instead of 1, 2, 1, 2, it would be 1, 2, 2, 1.
And I think in the context of guitar playing with your pick, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be called economy picking versus alternate picking.
Similar to sweep picking, for sure.
Sure, exactly.
Or economy picking.
Right.
Yeah. That would be the easiest way for a guitar player to process that.
So for me, I've always played with raking, and the past 2 years, I've decided to switch from being a 2-finger raking player to a 3-finger alternating, always 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2. So for me, for the past 2 years, I've been literally just trying to do that just because I couldn't before.
Gotcha.
So not because I felt limited or like I suck. It just I just wanted to be able to add that to my bag of tricks. So I think you could do either one. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jocko was an alternate always.
Yeah,
Well, I think the idea is if I'm walking and I'm taking steps, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. I don't have to think about anything. But if I had to think of hopscotch, right foot, right, left, and then jump around, you know what I mean? You have to think about your steps.
Yeah.
Really good analogy.
So now I just think about where I'm going, and my hand will take me there. So that's the reason that started well, okay, let's try that out and see if I can make it work.
Yeah, so maybe we could just practice literally going across the strings, maybe from the very bottom string, the G string, all the way up to the E string. We just go 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, like just in that sort of
Starting with the first finger.
yeah.
Alternate picking.
Okay. And part of the issues that I have are kind of the getting an even tone.
Yeah.
Like out of both
Yeah,
fingers.
yeah.
This one's kind of more curved, and this one's, you know what I mean? How do you-
Exactly.
Yeah, your fingers are different shapes, also different size, different thickness. Yeah, so all that plays into it.
So one thing I recommend just for an idea, try instead of thinking of plucking, think of pushing. So whenever you're playing a note, you're pushing it down instead of plucking it up like that.
Oh, great.
So when we're
Which isn't bad. It's just
Yeah.
a different sound.
yeah.
And you good in some music, but not all. Usually, you're gonna get more zing and less bass when you snap on the string.
Which is I would say most of the time if you're playing bass, you probably want to go for the fat, right? And less zing, but when you want it to stand out, you can change it.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the pop sort of sound and the zingy sorts of sounds, but in order to get like a more even tone among the two fingers, that's usually how I think about doing. I think about pressing down, and that usually, maybe with a little bit of an angle, that usually kind of helps out. So maybe try that. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
So kind of with that
mm-hmm.
sort of, it's more flat. The finger's got to be flatter.
Well, I was gonna say, I'm seeing your fingers are kind of like more
Yeah.
straight and not curved. I've never paid attention. Are our fingers curved or not?
Well, it kind of goes both ways. I mean, it's the classical guitar technique. Like with classical guitar, there's the rest stroke and the free stroke.
Yeah.
And so bass players, most of the time, unless you're playing really fast soloistic stuff, you're playing with rest strokes where you're resting the finger on the string.
The next string.
Yeah,
the next
passing
string.
through and landing on the next one.
Mhm.
Okay, so and it's kind of landing on the D string.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Which doubles up as a muting technique as well, because that's one of the most, we'll probably get to that. One of the most important things is that when you're playing this string, these three make zero sound whatsoever. And so one way that you can mute it, I mean, by pulling and landing on that one, well, you're going to mute that string automatically just by touching it and landing on it,
Sure.
So really, you only need to worry about muting these two.
Really only okay.
Because this one's going to get muted by default as soon as you strike that note.
Which not to get off from the fingers, but
Sure, right.
maybe the thumb helps. Like, what's the thumb doing throughout all this? Would you say?
that's a great question.
It's another good one of just like, do you float or do you plant? Or anchor, I guess.
Yeah, there's different philosophies, as guitar playing. There's many different philosophies. Generally speaking, most people, I would say, anchor. Right?
Definitely. And same thing. 2 years ago, I've always been an anchorer, and then 2 years ago, now I'm a floater. Floating, 3-finger, alternating. Yeah. But I catch myself going back to the old school way of doing it just every once in a while. But
Okay.
So when we're talking about anchor, the traditional way of doing it is that, at least I think, is you anchor two strings behind where you're playing. So if I'm playing on the G string, I'm anchoring on the A string. If I'm playing on the D string, I'm anchoring on the E string.
Oh, okay.
And if I'm playing on the A string, a lot of people will anchor on the pickup. Actually, that's a fairly common way of doing it. Or they'll end up like
thumb rest, some bases.
their thumb rest, or they won't anchor at all. And the reason for that is because when you're plucking on the G string right here, this string is being muted. Your anchor, your thumb, is muting the A string, and it's also kind of muting the E string. So you
that
have
makes
all of the strings covered. I mean,
I
this
can
is
feel that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it just makes you play really clean.
Yeah.
And your producer, your engineer is going to love you too.
yeah.
I'll hand you the bass.
Yeah,
sure.
And then you guys could show me kind of your different.
I got enough room on the
Oh yeah,
camera.
show me your 3-finger. Didn't Niels Henning Orsted Peterson?
Can you guys see that in the camera? Are we good?
Yeah.
Very interesting. Can you guys get in on the tight on his right hand?
This
there?
bass plays so smooth, bro.
And you just literally just got it. Like
Yeah, so like I said, I'm always 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. That's why you always go 1, 2, 1, 2. I always start with my middle finger. That's my leading finger.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm going 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. And you can see my thumb is traveling with the instrument.
Yeah, it might be hard. I wonder if this camera can get the there we go. Okay, so what would be that's awesome. What would be a great slow kind of exercise for me to work on to practice that sort
the
of thing?
best thing you can do on a bass guitar, I mean, yeah, licks, scales, things, and all that. I mean, it's great. But if you can't do this, you can just groove on a note and get it sounding consistent.
That's cool.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the most important thing. So, yeah, just play some eighth notes. And I'm playing kind of soft right now. I typically play with a softer touch because I like my action low.
Okay.
And if I dig in, you get some buzzing happening on there. So sometimes you want that. Like, sometimes a little bit of buzz is okay, but I typically play with a pretty soft touch.
Okay.
But yeah, so just different dynamics and really just going for consistency of tone. You don't want...
And you're actually using a bunch of fingers.
He's
right
using
now.
his. I would recommend that to start, but that is like really
Right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Like I said, 2 years I've been doing this. I'm having a hard time. Yeah, to go back to like when I started playing, it would look like this. Just two fingers.
Yes, and there's a natural kind of, even though it's not going to be 100% even, there is kind of a natural inconsistency with it,
Okay.
which is actually somewhat preferable for like an eighth note groove.
Yeah, because it pulses. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, exactly.
Which is, you want to be able to mitigate that to some degree, and so when you're practicing that sort of like, I'm trying to keep that as even as possible, but you can still hear a little bit of unevenness in that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the goal, I guess, for like starting. Set up a metronome and just play eighth notes. Play eighth notes alternating. I think that's great,
when you got that down, now I'm playing legato. I can play staccato as well. But trying to really go for a consistent sound between each note that you're playing.
Real consistent between each note. Like, so it's controlled. If you want to make it different, you
Sure.
can. But if you want it even, you can do that.
Exactly, yeah, consistent volume. And to be honest, like if I'm playing rock and roll where it's just driving,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with using one finger. And I find, I guess I'm using two and I'm moving them as
Yeah,
well. I've never realized
that's
that
the
before.
upright bass player's technique.
Yeah, exactly.
Upright bass players love that because it gives them a lot more power and control.
Yeah.
The idea is the more flesh you have on the strings, the more sound comes out of the strings.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So for like unamplified jazz as well as driving rock, it's the same kind of principle,
Totally,
which is kind of fun. Like to see the parallels.
Well, and you
there.
get the same benefit as a
Yeah.
pick. Playing with a pick gives you a lot of consistency because it's the same tick. It's
Yeah.
the same sound. Down sounds a little bit different from up, obviously, but you can just get a really consistent tone with a pick because it's not changing size and shape like your fingers do. So yeah, if I'm trying to emulate the sound of a pick, yeah, I'll just use the one finger.
It seems like it's you're kind of using mainly your middle finger to make contact with the string, and your first is sort of supporting it for power.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I've never thought of that before, but apparently that's what I do.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Brian Beller calls that the chime. That
Well, because he does the.
Yeah, there's ways when you're doing it with one finger and doing it like that. It's basically like this bass won't have it because the strings are dead on it.
Yeah.
But there's like a little bit of a zing that
Yeah.
comes to it. So there are different sorts of tones that you can get just from controlling.
I believe classical guitarists call that a rusciato, right? When you go both directions on the string.
Okay.
My brother's a classical guitar player, so I think that's what they call it. I could be wrong. Sorry, Jason.
So if you were to play, I'll give you the pick for a second, because
Okay,
I bet
sure.
you can do that too. Can you try the same thing, and then we can listen to the difference in tone between the pick and the finger?
Like, yeah, just hearing it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
on a pick. I'll take that back.
And this is the thing as a frustrated guitarist trying to play bass, that I think that there's this beautiful tone that when you can control your right hand and actually get that technique down, you just can't get with the pick. The pick's cool for some stuff, but then that kind of bloom that happens with your fingers.
Again, yeah, it's flesh versus plastic or
magic,
whatever.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of the reason like why I love bass is that like that bloom. And it's also that bloom helps you lock in with the kick drum so much more than that's what I found anyway.
Yeah.
That, like with a pick, it depends also on like what kind of music that you're playing, but having that bloom really helps just lock in with those sub frequencies in a way that like is really cool.
The way I divide it in my head is like he just said it helps you lock in with the kick drum. But what if I would need to lock in with the guitars instead? If
Oh, that's
playing
true.
metal,
Yeah,
or if
yeah.
you're playing really aggressive rock. So if I'm going to run some overdrive and I need that attack because me and the guitar player have some riffs that we're playing in unison,
Yeah.
I'm less concerned with what the kick pattern is and the kick drum because we're kind of separated at that point. You know, so that would be
Yeah.
like your hard rock, your metal genres and that kind of stuff. But yeah, if we're doing R&B
Exactly.
or funk or something different, I can care less what the guitar player is doing. I need to know what the kick drum is doing.
You know what? I've never really thought about it before, but something that you're saying kind of is making sense to me, which is that different, both being kind of in the low frequencies, you got your kick drum and then you got the bass guitar. Maybe if you've got that kind of wah kind of bloom happening, you let the kick do the majority of the attack, and then the bass comes in after.
Exactly.
And it differentiates. Whereas if I'm trying to hit it with a pick at the same time, it's maybe fighting that attack with the kick. And then,
Especially how they're EQ'd, that like upper, like the click of like a kick drum. I've always found like that bass, like just a little bit after the kick, always like sits really nicely, and I guess the finger playing.
I'll even in production and post, I'll set a side chain on the kick drum, or I guess on the bass from the kick drum, so that the bass kind of does that kind of thing, which on its own is really wacky. But when you put it with the kick, that way we get the smack from the kick drum, we get the oomph from the bass, and we're not fighting each other for. Again, that's a post trick. I guess you could do it live too, but. Owen Biddle and Mr. Barrington, they'll do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, oh man, that stuff is so much fun. But it's wacky. It's wacky. Yeah.
So can you guys think of some cool, like, sort of bass lines that you could reference, and maybe favorite things that you could think of that a guy like me should maybe learn, and in sort of within context of practicing some of those right hand techniques, something simple. I mean, I always love like bass lines like Elvis Costello tune, Pump It Up, because it's so signature and awesome, and it is like the song. It's like, you know, the bass just incredible.
I can tell you what I like if I'm at a place like this and I grab a bass off the wall or at a music store or whatever. There's one song that I always play, and it's this is my go-to no matter what it is. I've got it, like, I know what it sounds like, and so I can try all these different techniques with it, and it's a great.
That's cool.
Yeah, Neely Jayme, right?
Neely
Neely
Jayme.
Jayme. I mean, it's not the exact bass line. I always change it, but that song is just all about. It's consistency. You know what I mean?
With your thumb, can you do that one more time with your thumb? And maybe can you guys get in tight on the right hand there?
It's palm muting.
Yeah.
You are using your.
Yeah. It's,
and then,
it's like
and then
palm
with
muting
your,
with the pick. Yeah.
And then with your fingers, how would you approach that? Like kind of the simple 2-finger drill.
Oh, like these? Yeah. Well, the problem is the way I'm doing it. Yeah, it puts these in the wrong place. You know.
Oh,
So
well, you can even play it open. But
Sure,
that's cool.
sure,
Like,
yeah.
How would you do that without the muting?
So I'll show you. There's this technique called left-hand muting, which is kind of what you would do here. Like Jamie's doing that sort of vibe where it's kind of like palm muting. But then one thing that a lot of people end up doing.
it would be hard to do with this song, but
It is a little tricky, but it's basically what I'm doing is I'm draping my fingers across the strings and basically creating that mute on this side of the instrument, which is great.
Give it that Motown sound. Kind of sounds like he's playing with flat long strings right now. Yeah.
Versus. And it's basically a way of approximating this like palm mute thing, because it is a little tricky. It's not quite as ergonomic as a guitar to do the palm muting thing.
Yeah.
Because it always ends up being kind of this like, at least for me, it ends up being this.
I would use I would use the left hand if I was playing a line like "What Is Hip."
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like
Please jam.
but you know what I mean? Like, that's all left hand muting. My thumb would get so tired. It's already tired. You know what I mean? Like so. For me, it's like if it's a dubby kind of. Like I can get that with my thumb, no problem. But if it was like a driving eighth, like the Tower of Power, then left hand muting all the way.
Okay. What do you think about some bass lines?
Well, I mean, I was going to say Billie Jean is actually a pretty great one. I mean, I end up doing actually weirdly the bass line to Respect, which is actually kind of what I was doing. So there's a couple of things about this. First of all, the lower register, I live in this area down here.
Cash register.
Yeah.
Get out of the
cash register.
Back in the cash.
Yeah,
The cash register. Oh,
Chuck Rainey told me
Yeah.
that's called the money notes. He goes,
money-
you know why those are called the money notes? Those are the ones you get paid to play.
Yeah.
He said the money notes stop here.
Do you know?
These are the money notes.
I had an upright teacher, because like upright bass, like he took a dollar bill, he slid it through here, and the dollar bill stuck here, and the dollar bill fell out of the instrument when he put it on. So I was like, this is where you get paid, man.
Yeah. If you go too far, you start taking it away.
Yeah, exactly.
If you learn anything from watching this.
Yeah.
You play down here, and I
Money
mean,
notes.
there's a couple things I like about this. First of all, it's like nice and syncopated, and like a lot of the times for the stuff that I play, like more R&B and funk type things and jazz type things, it's syncopated, lots of like 16th notes, but also this thing right here.
I like using your thumb.
Yeah, I know. There's a couple
It's a
like
tunicky, don't
there's a couple like almost stigmas about putting the thumb over the back of the neck. I know for bass players and a lot of people think that like proper technique should be this like really bent wrist sort of thing. And when you see anybody actually play, it's much more relaxed. The wrist is always like super relaxed, and I almost always end up playing this low F with my thumb.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've never done that
Wow.
before.
Because I mean, this ends up being kind of a pain. Like whenever you're playing from this F to this A flat, like kind of like Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs.
That'd be Duck Done, yeah.
Which is a great bass line, just quarter notes. F, F, A flat, B flat, F, F, A flat, B flat. But this is just kind of a pain to always be playing this F down here. It just always has this, I always get this bent wrist, and I really try and avoid doing the bent wrist whenever I can. This just feels so much more natural. And yes, it does look a little wonky, but I mean, I don't really care.
Hey, whatever works, man. As guitar players, I think it was probably Hendrix that legitimized.
Yeah.
And it actually kind of sounds different. There's something about the thumb fretting it where there's just a slightly different tone, at least on guitar for sure, and I bet it's the same.
Well, yeah, it's also just a control thing. There's something about it, like to play it like that versus that feels really weird.
Well, you can tell again. You play a lot of jazz because you went for F. If it was, it would have been E if you were a rocker. You know what I mean? Like that's the reason why that's so hard. I'm like, I know, I would never do that.
Yeah, play an F. F is not
How
a
would I
key.
do that?
It's an excellent point.
Yeah, the way I would have to do it.
Yeah.
You can see I'm trying to grab that with like this part of my finger, and it's really tough.
Try with the thumb.
When I feel kind of weird.
It takes a while to get used to, but like
Yeah.
those two things, the respect bass line and I guess the Booker T and the MGs, those are things that I do because bass is just such a long scale, and it's not the most ergonomic instrument, and so anything that I can do to just feel comfortable in this lower register when I'm picking up a bass for the first time, that's usually where I go for.
Good warm-ups. Will you play those both one more time for me?
Oh yeah. Okay, so the respect bass line. Sorry, I'm playing it really slow.
That's okay. It's good, actually.
And then the Booker T and the MG's Green Onions.
And again, listen how consistent and even his tone is. Now the notes are jumping out at you, especially when he changes.
Nice and consistent.
Again, you can tell with someone who's new to bass is when they go to the next fret. Right.
Like that, yeah. And it is a bit of a challenge to make that like leap every time. And this is probably the hardest possible interval on the bass is between this F and this A flat.
And one more thing, if you can play that again,
Yeah.
also listen. No fret slide, no string slide, right? He has to do a little micro shift to get to that fret and back. And whereas like an inexperienced bass, you would hear like all of this stuff when they go. There's always that. The string slide or the gliss, which again, it's cool. It's when you want to do it.
So just working on getting to be clean with
Exactly
the right
how you would
numbers
sing it.
as well. Oh, that's good. Without all
That's
that
the way-
voice half.
that's the way you wanna
say it.
Yeah, and again, like if you want it, that's cool. But you want to be able to not do it as well. And most people are going to want you to not do it.
Yeah.
So you brought up a great thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was going to say, I just remembered something you mentioned yesterday, which was a guitar player that you were recording and they were playing a bass line and they were slapping the strings.
So I had a friend, he was a roommate of mine for years, and I usually track bass on his recordings, but he just came up to into my room. He's like, "Hey, dude, I'm having trouble recording this bass part. Can you just kind of come help me out?" And so the problem was he was setting his gain structure in Pro Tools, which a lot of us do recording. He's like, I'm setting it, and everything's fine, but then when I go to play it, it keeps clipping. I don't know what's going wrong, which was funny because he's also a great engineer. I was like, all right, dude, let me see what you're doing. And he's playing a country line, so it's always like, some sort of kick pattern, locking type pattern. I go, cool, man, let me watch you. Yeah. And he kept, he's like, every time I do this, it clips. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Don't do that.
Well, so things you might do on the guitar with a
exactly.
string.
Sure.
Yeah. And like every little note counts so much, like because there's only one note in that sort of situation, like so much more, because that ends up being like.
Well, and the funny thing is when I was like, yeah, so take that out, and he goes, okay. I was like, oh shoot, wait, that's actually pretty tough. I'm like, I know. Welcome to bass playing.
Yeah.
This is how it is. You have to do very little, and you have to do it well, and it gets harder because a lot of us we lean on those things to help us stay in time. But if you're playing a line,
you have to do all that.
If you're doing all that to keep in time, all you really need to do as a bass player. It's so much harder to do that, to cut out the notes that just don't need to be there, because the hi-hat's got them, the guitar player's got them. So as a bass player, we see our Victor Wootens and these guys. For me, I grew up watching Geddy Lee from Rush, and he plays in a three-piece, right? So he can overplay because he doesn't really have to worry about stepping on a second or guitar player and all that kind of stuff. But when you're playing in a five-piece band, you gotta cut down a lot. 80% of what you thought you were going to end up playing, and just play the root notes.
So not a lot of ghosty stuff. It's got to be a little bit tighter.
Well, unless the genre calls for it.
Yeah, I mean,
right. There's a time and place.
There is a time and place, and the ghosty stuff does add something, but little things like especially that hit on 2 and 4.
Yeah, you can pretty much never do that one.
Yeah, that
unless you're playing on your own, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is plenty of room for the ghosty stuff, but.
Right.
Not in country.
It's good to not be able to do it and not be like, oh, I'm doing that, and not like you. It's what you were sort of discovering with your friends.
Yeah, he didn't even realize it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good thing to think about. Well, I wonder what time we're at here. We probably got we've got about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So maybe you guys can tell me. This is my new bass, and
plays like butter.
I'm so excited.
We
got to give some props to our hosts here at Warwick.
Yeah, they know what's up.
Yeah, I mean, it was really exciting getting. I showed up the other day, on Monday, and it was ready for finish, and so I got to stain it actually. And
you put the red on there, yeah.
I did, and then they put it in the booth with it's an amazing process where they put it in the booth for the spray lacquer, the satin lacquer, and they put a GoPro on on that, so I got video of them going all around the bass with
that's so cool.
It's really neat.
I think you got the USB drive, so
USB-C.
you can plug in your hard drive and download your lines.
Yeah,
totally.
It's not what it's for. It's for charging the battery. That's baller. That is so cool.
Yeah, because it's got active electronics, and that's what. So that brings me to this is a great thing. It's a little bit like intimidating sometimes picking up a bass like this. Some bass you got a P bass, you got a volume and a tone. That's it. But this bass has got some pretty heavy-duty active electronics. So maybe you can explain exactly what's going on here
and stuff,
and how you would set it up. Like if you were like, okay, here's a tone I would go for.
Adam, you want to go first, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I actually
because this is another thing that's very. Oh, you haven't used.
Well, no. I got a general gist. All right, so we got volume. We have pickup blend. We have the 2 pickups because there really are only 2 pickups in bass playing. There's the P pickup and there's the J pickup. J pickup.
So most guitarists are used to a switch, but on this you got an infinite blend, right?
Yeah. I mean, some basses will. It's very rare. Like a Jaguar, I guess, has a switch, but for the most part, you'd blend between the 2. Okay. Or on a jazz bass, actually, you would have 2 dedicated volume knobs.
Yeah.
Good point.
But most of the time, to be honest, I put it in one of 3 places, either P,
all the way up,
middle,
or
all the way back. Because there's not. Yeah, I mean that's generally, I guess, personal preference. Then we have what is this?
Mids.
Oh, this is that's treble. Oh, I guess it is mids.
I think that's active mids on this.
Oh yeah, this is mids. Okay. Well, maybe you should be the one explaining this.
I don't know. Yeah, I've been using this bass all week. I think that's
those are concentric treble bass.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, treble bass right there. And to be 100% honest, I usually leave it pretty flat.
Okay.
If anything, I boost the mids ever so slightly if I'm feeling like I'm getting a little bit lost in the mix. The mids, of course, are where I go.
That's where you're gonna cut through. Yeah.
Just cut through a little bit, but if I'm not feeling like I'm sticking too far out, roll it back.
So could you show us like just the difference in sound between the different, and when you would set it up, those three things?
Well, hold on. Before we do that, let me say this.
Yeah.
Because this is very particular. It's the same thing. Like, hey, so what do you play? A Strat or a Pole or a
Sure.
You know, it's like everyone's got their thing and how they set it up. But I would say in general, and these basses have an active and a passive.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I play passive. I have active basses, but I rarely use it. All my basses that are active, I've got a switch on it and it stays off. Okay. I only use the active if I want it to, because I like the sound of the pickups.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just this is the way God intended it. You know, the bass should sound good on its own. I shouldn't need to do this to make it sound better. What I might need to do is like this song needs a little bit more oomph. Okay, now I'll do that for that song.
Bring the bass up a bit.
And then like, oh, this song needs a little bit more zing. Okay, so there we've done it. Now we're back to rock. Okay, here we go. You know what I mean? Like, I don't touch the preamp unless the song calls for it. And this is kind of gets confusing because your amp has the same EQ controls.
Okay. Yeah,
you know what I mean? So people are like, well, what do I do? Do I touch the EQ on my bass?
Right.
Or do I touch the EQ on the amp? Or do I do both of them? And it is kind of confusing.
Yeah, sure.
And so the way I've always put it in mind is I set the amp for the venue. So at the venue, I walk in, I set it's passive, and if it's not, you know, everything's flat. Nothing's happening, and I'll play and I'll go. You know, I'm listening for things like in the room as a bass player, you're like going through. This one note is louder for some reason. Okay, I find that note and I notch it out on the amp, and so I'll just set the amp for here's what the stage is going to sound like, and then if it changes per song, I'll go over here and I'll do some of the things that he's going to talk about. You know, for this type of song, I'll set it like this, or you know what I mean?
Okay, so it sounds like basically.
Pun intended.
Love it.
But yeah, essentially, what you do is kind of go with the passive thing.
Because you can't go wrong. You can't screw it up with the passive.
Simplicity, right? Like get the tone on the amp, and then this is for fine tuning if absolutely necessary.
But, well, because, you know, if I'm 10 feet out from the amp and I'm just like, I need some more. Well, I got to get... You know what it's like. How many times you go all the way back to your amp and you're like twisting stuff. Imagine if on your guitar you're just like, I need some more. And there you got it.
So you could think of this as almost like adding an EQ pedal to your rig if you're a guitar player. Right?
It's exactly an EQ.
Absolutely.
And not all actives have this EQ, but the active just is like, I guess
it's powering. You can power the pickups too. I don't know.
I mean, active versus passive is of course like super personal sort of thing. I mean, it's also a genre based sort of thing because like all the like gospel and like, you know, a lot of these like very active sorts of like slap tones.
Yeah.
Like I'm not really doing that right now, but like the slap tone would be like very treble heavy, very bass heavy, very like no mid.
Yeah.
So maybe you can just run us through a few of those in your opinion.
Here, do it on this one.
This is not the best one.
The strings are more fresh on that one. I've been killing this bass all week.
Yeah, it's like if you were going to do a like that type of tone, or you know, going to sort of more traditional R&B feel, or a rock tone.
So I mean, honestly, for the rock tone is also kind of like would be scooped a little bit anyway too, just to like.
Also, if I'm doing rock, P pickup, or if it's a J bass, front pickup. Yeah, that's just where that's where the hair and where the beat sounds.
So that I mean, like this would be. Versus the J pickup. Not really exactly what you want to be doing.
Sure, so you'll go for the P, and then you'll maybe add some treble.
For a little treble, a little bass maybe, roll back the mids a little bit. So this is with the mids a little bit more in. Versus with them out and like the more of the P pickup. So it's just a little bit more blended for that sort of like driving eighth note sort of vibe.
Okay.
Like the J is more for the funk or like the.
Well, with the precision side of the pickup.
Yeah.
Once we start adding in the neck, this got more articulation to it.
That's the J.
Yeah, and if I go the P side. You know what I mean? It's more sluggish sounding.
Which is, I mean, like then that comes down to just personal preference because there's tons of people who would play that with a P pickup, but the J is like really forward. It's really right there, and it's
got the instant snap to it.
Yeah,
so a little bit more like forward. You can really hear the articulation.
It's the same as like if you're playing. Imagine you're playing really fast. I mean, imagine as a guitar player, you might go towards the bridge a little bit because it's just got a more attack to it. I mean, more of a snap. Whereas over here, the strings are more obviously, right? We got more. It's more loose here, so it sounds more sluggish. Over here, it's tighter. It sounds tighter.
A little
you know
fast
what I mean?
response.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you want to accentuate that sound, like moving my hand, you know what I mean? So if I want to accentuate this nasally, pointy sound,
You'll go to the J.
yeah, that's what the pickup does the same thing that moving my hand does. You know what I mean?
Great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Versus
Show off.
It's the P side.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I prefer the P side for most things. But
Yeah, he's a P player. I'm a J player.
Yeah.
So we're on the opposite
it's just
side.
yeah, it's just a little gruntier, and it's also, I mean, the other reason why I like the P is because it can get a lot fatter with the left hand muting type thing. So versus which.
And so for me, I would rectify that. So right now, it's like, well, obviously the other one sounds better because there's more bass in it.
Right, so then
just go
you-
ahead and roll up some of that bass,
Bass?
right? Maybe more.
Yeah, that's as far as it goes.
Okay.
But yeah, it does sound good.
So then I would go to the amp. You know what I mean? Like you can still get that. You can make up for that thinness with processing and that kind of stuff. So
Maybe get the best of both worlds if you want that J pickup, but
Sure.
you got
Well, and that's why most of the time it goes straight in the middle, and then you just get the best of both worlds.
yeah. So if I have the option, I live right there in the center for the most part.
Okay, well that's a lot, man.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah,
killer.
we-
What a
wow.
great hour. Yeah.
We haven't even really played anything.
Yeah,
yet.
we just-
going over the mechanics. Yeah.
No, but you've given me some great riffs to think about, and some great, even just sitting on one note and trying to get I hadn't thought of that. I was just like, I got to play through scales, but just sitting there on one note and trying
Yeah.
to play even is probably just as beneficial, right?
Yeah,
Well,
that
because
was
you can
terrific.
already play scales. I mean, that's the thing is like all of the licks fit on the bass. It's just now right hand technique.
Yeah, your left hand technique's going to apply with almost no problem. Maybe
Yeah.
the string spacing will throw you off, but it's going to come down to the right hand. That one's going to struggle.
And I guess maybe the last thing we should probably mention is just think about the damn kick drum a lot more than a guitar player would, right?
Yeah.
100%.
Well,
100%.
and another thing, and this is a not often mentioned thing, the snare drum too, because the snare drum, it's nice to hear when the snare attacks, because then you can let go when the snare happens, and that's something
Right,
that I think about a lot.
Oh.
Like,
Which is totally different from like letting it ring out.
yeah,
Boom.
Very cool.
Right,
Yeah.
so
you got
like-
a lot of things fighting when that's happening.
Yeah, so
When
you're
you-
always
yeah.
thinking about like making room for everyone else because again, that mindset we were talking about at the beginning, my mindset as a bass player is to make sure that everyone can be heard. So bass players don't get compliments. Someone might come up to me and be like, dude, you play guitar so well. I hear everyone else get compliments, and then I know I did my job right. You know what I mean? Because if they come up to,
That's great.
because otherwise, if I'm walking all over everyone, they might not have heard all of your notes. They might not have
Right.
heard how great the singer sounded because the bass player was screwing everything up. So I take other people's compliments as my own. That's kind of how I do it.
Man, if we got to wind up on anything, that's great. Bass players are the unsung heroes of the band. They're
Comes with the
driving the
territory.
ship. Lowest common denominator, right? Like you can definitely screw up the sound of the band with just one move of your.
Absolutely. Yes.
and have.
many times. I lost a lot of gigs that way.
You've got a lot of power, and yet you're like, so generally the unsung heroes. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah,
It is what it is.
Well, this was great, man. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
Can't
Thanks
thank
for
you.
having us on.
It's been,
Yeah, my
this
pleasure.
thing's been great. I mean, it's great to make some new friends and meet some new super talented musicians.
Yeah, totally, dude.
So thanks to Warwick and Framers for hosting us this week.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, check out their channels. They're down in the video description below. I'll put links on the screen as well, I'm sure, in the video. And we'll see you guys from GitCon 2018. Over and out.